Hello. So today I want to talk about Yeshua and his lost years, but I specifically want to focus on his tasks and his mission and what we actually benefit from it, right? So there's a lot of talk about his lost years, and a lot of it comes from a few main sources. Typically, you'll hear about it from the Buddhist text that they were able to find called The Life of Saint Isa, which tells the story of a saint who moved through Asia, who was remarkably similar to who Christians call Jesus, leaving many to believe that they are one and the same. And I'm not here to say whether they are or are not, just specifying that that's one of the main texts that's used whenever we're having this discussion. Now, for those of you who might be a bit new to me, have maintained a face to face relationship with Yeshua for the last few years, having my first face to face encounter with him in 2019. It was New Year's. Long story short, I was on a cruise ship reading a book. All of a sudden, I felt his presence come into the room. I turn and he walks through my wall. um, so I've been able to maintain. Now, I've told that story multiple times before. You can hear me tell the full story in other videos on YouTube, but I've maintained that relationship from there. And just in our relationship of really getting to know each other, I've spent a lot of time asking him questions about his life. So while I don't currently claim to know everything about him, I'm still asking him stuff. I'm still piecing things together, putting things in order. I have asked a lot of questions and gotten a lot of very direct answers about his life, who he is as a spirit, how do people know him in different cultures, and what he actually did when he was a historical figure walking the earth. And there's one thing that a lot of people do get right, which is that he traveled the known world at the time, preaching his message and demonstrating the kingdom. Understand that Yeshua was not the forefather or founder of Christianity. That came much later. He really has nothing to do with it. They bear his name as a mascot, but truthfully, that was never his structure. Um, there's a quote that says that the wise man points at the moon and the fool looks at the finger. Yeshua preached about a kingdom and a royal family. And then he also preached about you being God. He didn't really emphasize himself being better than you in the way that Christianity presents it. So they've kind of gotten distracted, pointing at the one who's leading them instead of going where he pointed. Now, there have been, to get off that for a moment, there have been some texts that do get close. And what I mean by close is close to what I've heard him say himself, right? I've had a relationship with him since 2017, face to face since 2019. I've asked a lot of questions. So I haven't found one book that 100% gets everything right. I'm actually working on my own narrative based on this, but that's not out yet. I'm still asking questions. But I found that Gospel of the Holy 12 gets really close to some of the specific things that he shared with me about his life. There's areas of a book called The Super Gospel, written by Robert Farrell, that gets very close to some things that he told me about his childhood. And that's because they have fragments in it from a bunch of other texts. Not the Gospel of the Holy 12, but the Super Gospel. The Super Gospel is a book that compiles a bunch of ancient biblical texts or modern biblical texts. Pretty much his standpoint is, what if we took everything that was there, canon, non-canon, and just put it together? So he harmonized the story out of it. And because of where some of those fragments come from, like the infancy gospels, it talks about his childhood a little bit. So I found areas of the super gospel to be accurate. I found segments of the Gospel of the Holy 12 to be accurate. I found segments of the Aquarian gospel to be accurate. Out of the four main gospels that are in the Bible, I found John to be the most accurate. The others are a little shaky. And that's just going off of the things that he told me and how well they present who he is and what he was trying to do. Now, So going back to what I know that he did. So I know that he traveled the known world. He went region to region, city to city, place to place, right? And he presented his message. He shared his mission. His mission was to make earth just like heaven, to awaken humanity to remember that they are also gods, to bring them back into a place of ruling and reigning with him as sons. He came as brethren, right? Our older brother coming to remind us who are the other sons of God that we forgot that we were. He came to remind us of that which we were and presented himself as an evangelist or an advertisement to our own awakening. Pretty much what he kept saying over and over again is that I'm just you inside out. I'm just you at bare minimum, right? I often say that he didn't come to show us what a perfect man is. He came to show us what the bare minimum of a son of God looks like, which is why he could then turn to his disciples, John 14:12-14, and say, if you believe in me and the works that I do, those same works shall you do. And even greater works than these shall you do, because I go to the Father. He's not setting himself at a pedestal that cannot be surpassed. In fact, if we look at the moments where he got angry with his disciples, it was because they didn't do something that he considered them capable of doing. They woke him up to speak to a storm when he considered them capable. He comes down off a mountain from transfiguring, and it's all of them wrestling to cast out one demon. He considered them capable of casting out a demon, and they failed his expectation. So the issue isn't us thinking in this capacity. Our area of pride isn't us thinking that we're so good that we don't need them or we can possibly pass them. The area of pride is never stepping to the standard, the bare minimum of the standard that he actually laid out for us. So he came to present what you really are, what you can really do. And in that, he traveled the world, preaching that same message. And because he is a spirit that occupied a body, he's an avatar, as in aspect of divinity or divinity itself manifested in human form. The book of John says the word became flesh. What is the word? Well, the Bible says the word is God. So whatever the logos is, which is the word there, is something that God is. So he represents as logos. Logos means logic. And there's a few other things that you can get out of logic. So you can say that he's the mentality of the divine. He's the blueprint of the divine. He's the love of the divine. And then that housed itself in the human form and came and preached a message to all of us. In that, he represents what we are. That's also our origin story. We're all aspects of divinity that got to earth and forgot who we were, which is why he talks so much about repentance and remembrance. It's not about being sorry for your misdeeds. It's about stepping back into your identity. And therefore, you step away from, if we're dealing with actions, you step away from what's not actually you. So one of the things that he did, which I found, right? People often get scared, typically Christians, when you start to branch outside of Christianity. But I can say this with full confidence. The royal family got cooler when I let them not be Christian. When I let them be omnipotent and I let them be omnipresent and I let them be multicultural and I let them be I let them be so vast that any one culture can't contain them, they got so much cooler. That meant all the stories that related to them just emphasized how important they were, right? So when studying Yeshua and again having conversations with him, talking about his life, there were things that he shared with me, and in few cases I did find them written down by someone. It was some phenomenal stuff, and it really put his mission into a different perspective for me. So no, studying outside of the 66 books of the Bible and the confines of Christianity and organized religion, it doesn't necessarily diminish the royal family at all. It actually makes them cooler. For example, when talking about Yeshua's earthly life, this is him as a person, as a historical figure walking the earth, going through these trials. Something that he did is, I like to call him the eternal initiate, in that something that he did is go into all these different cultures as a prodigy. He did whatever their hardest spiritual practices were, mastered them, and received the greatest power from them. He didn't need the extra power because he's already infinite. So he gave that to us, right? So let's talk about it. So Gospel of the Holy 12, there's a segment, I believe it's chapter 5 in the Gospel of the Holy 12, correct me if I'm wrong, but it talks about Yeshua's early life, but it's him beginning his ministry is the part of it. It mentions that he was married before he started his journey. His wife died. But then it says that he goes to school. He goes to school in Egypt, and then it gives you a list of the things that he learned. It says that he learned astronomy, astrology, geography, geometry. He learns how to talk to animals. He learns the science of plants and herbs and spices. He learns a bunch of stuff from the Egyptians. He learns the art of transmutation and transfiguration. So Gospel of the Holy 12, I like that segment because it tells you specifics of what he learned while he was in Egypt. And something interesting I found is that it never actually says that he trains the Egyptians in anything, right? So it says that he goes to school in Egypt. Well, first he goes to school in Jerusalem, then he goes to school in Egypt. He comes back to Jerusalem and he's a teacher. So after he leaves Egypt, he starts teaching. Something that I found interesting is that it says that he spent about 7 to 8 years face to face with the royal family. We commend Moses for his 40 days or his 80 days face to face with Yahweh. Well, Yeshua did a similar thing, but he did it for 7 years straight. So there was a 7-year period where he was just in the presence of mom and dad. He was standing in the Council of El. That's powerful. Imagine the energy you get from being in front of mom and dad for 7 years uninterrupted. So next, after he leaves Egypt, it says he goes back to Jerusalem. He starts teaching. He's doing ministry. He goes into Jerusalem. Then it talks about him moving further east. So he goes into Persia. He goes into India. He goes into Tibet, right? Something that he does in all of these different regions is that he heals the sick, he feeds the poor, he confronts religious leadership, he does whatever their hardest spiritual practices are because he's a prodigy. He's a complete incarnation of divinity itself. Therefore, the practices don't really add anything to him, but he's doing it for us. He's even doing a lot of the heavy lifting. He's doing a lot of our hard work. Now, talking about some of these rigorous tasks, when he was in Egypt, there was a part of their initiation process for their adepts, their high-level mystics, their high-level saints and sages, where they would pretty much put you in a furnace in the sands. And they would superheat it to the point where you could actually cremate someone in this heat. And their high-level saints would sit in the furnace, and for him, he sat in there for days straight until the fire went out. So that's one of the trials. That's one of the trials related to Anubis that he went through. Going through the fiery sands, or the baptism of fire, which is an Egyptian concept before it became a Christian concept. He went through that first. Sitting in scorching hot sands in a furnace, superheated. And the idea is mental fortification. If you let your mind or your soul control your body, that as long as your soul is strong enough, nothing can destroy your body. So he goes over to, let's go to India. Let's skip to India because that's a little fun. Some of the trials that he does over there, right? He goes through what some would consider yoga. He goes through mantras, he goes through practices, he goes through this and that. But one of the most powerful things that he does is that there's a well I believe it's in Penteconda, that's related to a deity known as Betala, which is an extreme dimension. It's a very ferocious dimension of power. And pretty much what happened is the way that well works is that Betala requires all of you for the dimension of power that he gives. And he's actually responsible for giving one of like the most potent forms of power, especially when it deals with casting out demons. And in order to do so, Yeshua threw himself into a boiling hot well. My friend Alex Utterman, she calls it acid water, because that's pretty much what it was. And upon doing so, he met the figure known as Betala, who gave him a ton of energy. So we have him sitting in a furnace for a few days straight. We have him jumping into a well filled with boiling hot acid water. Those are just some of the trials that he went through. And then, of course, you get to Calvary. One of the important facts about Calvary is that he rode in on a donkey. The donkey in Kemetic symbolism represented Set. This meant that he'd already conquered Satan before he went to Calvary, which meant that nothing that he was getting ready to do was for his own gain. He'd already won. So everything he did following that was for us. It was for our benefit. And this is something that it says, the Bible says that he got up with all power in his hand. That again, that death, burial, and resurrection is another process, but that was through, that was an Israelite thing. That was within the confines of Yahweh, within that region. That's why he started dealing with Yahweh's law. It was to access the power of even Yahweh. So in receiving Yeshua, building relationship, receiving him as Christ, you tap into layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of power. Because he didn't need the extra power. The extra power didn't really register as extra because he was already all powerful. The power that he gained, he gives to us. So that means you don't have to go sit in the furnace and torture yourself. You don't have to jump into a boiling hot well full of acid water in order to receive power. He did all of that stuff for you. So even when it comes to our spiritual progress, he streamlined the process. Instead of us making us start off at the bottom and work our way up, he starts us off somewhere in the middle and helps us get there. There's a lot of early stuff we really don't have to do just because he did that for us already. So by identifying with him and in him and allowing him to live through you, like it says, like Paul said, it's no longer I that live, but Christ that's moving through me. Once you get to that state, the process is so much more streamlined. So yeah, the best thing I can say about that is Yeshua makes our spirituality easier, makes it streamlined. We get more for our work. Instead of having to spend 20, 30, 40 years in practices to get one little result, he streamlines the process. We identify as him. We have the graces of him. And those are just a few things. Like I said, I'm working on my own narrative, kind of putting together some of his trials from before he became Yeshua and what he did as a historical figure. That'll be coming out whenever I get that finished. I'm working on a few projects right now, but this is something I did want to talk to y'all about. So if you know a little bit more about this topic, I've heard and read a few things, like Manly P. Hall mentioned that there was a moment when he was going through his Egyptian initiation, Yeshua I'm talking about, where one of the things that they did was put you in a sarcophagus. They said that the power of life was so strong in him that when they put him in the sarcophagus, his spiritual pressure split it, representing that he already had power over death itself and was walking in resurrection. That's powerful. So my challenge to you all who are watching, what are some trials that you know that he went through in various cultures, in various regions? And what do you believe the gain was for it? That's food for thought. Did you know all of this stuff already? Is this something new? Leave comments in the comment section down below. That's it for this session. If you want to connect with me or any of the things I have going on, my courses, classes, books, and everything else, you can check it out on my website, caveofmystery.org. That's it. Until next time, y'all be blessed. Later.